welcome to today's A-Team Group webinar on leveraging interoperability, laying the foundations for unique best-of-breed trading solutions. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at A-Team Group, and I'll be moderating the webinar. Before we get started, just a few events and things we've got coming up that you can see and sign up for on the bottom of your page. On 6th of June, we're hosting Trading Tech Briefing New York, which will have a focus on buy and build, the future of capital markets technology. We'll be doing something similar back in London here on the 9th of September. And in the meantime, you can join us for our first AI and Capital Markets Summit, again in London on the 20th of June. That's enough of that, so let's press on with the webinar. Our expert speakers today are Peter Eliades, Managing Director, Electronic Trading at Clear Street, Vitaly Kudinov, Senior Vice President of Sales and Business Development at DevExperts, and Dan Schleifer, President and Co-founder at Interop.io. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a moment, but first a little bit of info for you to make the best of the webinar. On your screen to the right of the video, you'll see a Slido section. We have two sections today. In one are some polls. We'll be running 3 polls today, so do please vote. We'd like to gain your opinion and gauge what the industry is thinking here. In the other one, you can post your questions to the speakers. Please post these whenever you like as we go along, and we'll gather them up and answer as many as we go sometime before the end of the webinar. So place your questions there, and we'll be able to put them to the speakers. That's it. Enough of me, and let me ask our speakers to introduce themselves. So Peter, coming to you first.
Thank you, Sarah. Great to be here. My name is Peter Eliades, Managing Director here at Clear Street, and I run the electronic trading systems and the desk for all of our access to markets and equities, options, and also into the world as we expand into futures and other types of assets. Thank you very much for having me today.
Pleasure. Dan.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan Schleifer. I'm the co-founder and president of Interop.io. Interop.io was formed as the merger between Glue42 and Finsemble 12 months ago, and we're the leader in the desktop interoperability space.
Thank you. And Vitaly, please.
Yeah, hello, my name is Vitaly. I represent DevExperts, a software provider for brokers, exchanges, and wealth management firms, so buy-side, sell-side firms. Trading platforms, back-end, front-end, matching engines, market data solutions.
Excellent, thank you. So plenty of expertise in the room and looking forward to the conversation. But let's start with a poll question for you, our audience. It asks, to what extent has your trading organization implemented desktop interoperability? And so while you answer that question, let me come to Dan to talk about how he sees the state of play on desktop interoperability across trading.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think desktop interoperability as a topic has been around for about a decade, but we've seen a rapid acceleration in the adoption of desktop interoperability over the past 2 to 3 years. What was traditionally kind of the domain of the largest tier 1 sell sides with very large budgets and IT staff has moved into the smaller tier 2 and tier 3 sell sides, and notably over the past 18 to 24 months has seen a rapid adoption on the buy side. And so I think what's interesting is that we're seeing kind of all 3 legs of the stool, the sell side, the buy side, and the vendors that supply the technology that support those firms, all really embracing interoperability. And so we're seeing that acceleration because both sides of the street and the vendors that support them are embracing it. And I think a big part of that has been the adoption of the industry standards known as FDC3 that provide a common language for applications to speak together in the browser or on the desktop, which makes a lot more of this plug and play. So we're consistently seeing more and more firms implementing successfully, being able to get a demonstrable and measurable ROI on that investment, and then continuing to expand that footprint based on those results.
Okay, thank you. Very positive. Over to Peter, as a practitioner, how do you see it out there?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. And I think that's a great theme to focus on with some of my commentary. Is it's going to be really leveraging some of the evolution of markets and accessing markets and running successful electronic integration with humans, right, to actually be able to do types of transactions across the globe and have those transactions actually translate into different types of actions, both downstream and then to the regulatory environment. So as a practitioner who runs a team of 8 here at ClearStreet, what we're always trying to do is really solve, first of all, the basic problems of challenging access to markets in a regulated environment, which is really making sure that you're able to connect in a very cohesive and secure way to data sources, meaning like markets, of course, and networking, and of course, market data that is also going to drive your investment thesis. And then being able to take that data and then partition it into bite-sized information packets that you're then going to be able to make investment decisions on. We do that all the time with homegrown solutions here at ClearStreet. We have a very robust engineering staff that will help us make bespoke solutions for our clients and some of their challenges. So interoperability to jump between all of these different types of vendor products and internal products that we're growing internally here are very important to come up with cohesive solutions for our clients.
Thank you. And Vitaly, when you're out there in the market talking to clients, are you seeing a big take up too?
Yes, and since we talk a lot also with retail brokers, we see that open architecture is the key factor of a broker selecting a vendor and a product, right? So we, for instance, allow to connect to our trading platforms content generated by other providers. Also, we allow to take components of our trading platform and use them alone, like not as a single solution, but just as the smaller piece of technology, like front end or back end or market data. And we never stick our clients only to our solutions, right? So the door is always open for more advanced or just non-existing piece of software to be introduced by someone else.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. Let's have a look at those poll results, if we may. Thank you, Dan. Want to comment on those? How does that look to you?
Yeah, I think that's it's actually fantastic to see, only 10% have not implemented anything at all. I think, what's interesting about this is that you've got some level of interoperability. So people are putting in the effort to connect their systems together. I think Peter and Vitaly both just spoke to in different ways to kind of the best of breed build and buy, which I know is the theme of the upcoming briefing in New York kind of perspective. And so I think that some extent, what we're seeing is different levels of maturity in the market around interoperability. We actually introduced the interoperability maturity model to help people identify where they can make their investments to kind of go from not at all to a limited extent, to some extent, to a good extent, to a great extent. So I think the distribution curve that you see here makes a lot of sense, resonates with what we're hearing from customers. And what they're trying to figure out is what's the value, the return on the investment to go to the next tier. And so I think we'll talk about that more later in the presentation.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And that shows us people are making investment. And my next question is a little bit basic on that basis, but Vitaly, I'm going to come to you to say, why should firms be investing in interoperability now? And I guess that means, putting more in and having set out, what do they need to do?
Sure. So I work in this industry for more than 15 years. And what I noticed is that actually IT sector is developing faster than financial sector. So basically, we've seen already a few technical revolutions in IT, while financial organizations keep using the same business processes, the same workflows. They just need software, right? So it's better when you can replace your software, not completely by some parts, or you can just add new pieces to your puzzle if they are available and interoperable and compatible, right? So it can be data compatibility, but it can be also software compatibility. So I think when you choose a software, you just keep in mind that in 5 years, the software may get old, while you still need to run your business effectively.
Okay, fine. And Peter, as a practitioner, is there a need to invest quite a lot at the moment, or is that done?
No, it's a continual investment, right? You're always sharpening the pencil, and I couldn't agree more with Vitaly in that statement, because the reality is that yes, there have been, you know, solutions in the financial industry that have also had to undergo things like mergers and acquisitions, and then you have to build systems to interpret those different, you know, functions that were sort of the legacy of one infrastructure that you ultimately needed to migrate to another infrastructure. I went through that in one of my prior bank acquisitions in 2008 and 2009, where prime brokerage had to get integrated. That's one of the beautiful things about you know, being a last mover advantage here at Clear Street, because you're able to jump in and create from scratch, you know, with the latest technology. You know, one of those obviously being data, you know, distribution and also storage within the cloud, of course, right? That really wasn't around in 20 years ago. So we're leveraging that that ubiquitous access effectively through message busing to be able to feed the different systems that are inherently needed for you know, doing complex settlements and delivery and custody requirements that are required. And it does take many years, right? And to defend some of the larger incumbents, it's taken them decades to get to a competency level. However, just like Vitaly said, and I'm sure Dan will double click on this, is that there's with software and much more malleability and interoperability, you're able to actually leapfrog and make things much more efficient.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. And Peter, staying with you, and a little bit of blue sky thinking here. With limitless investment and no technology or resource constraints, what would optimal desktop interoperability look like, and what would it add in terms of value?
Okay, so I'm going to first have to say, you know, I've been in electronic trading for 20 plus years, but that will never happen successfully unless there's a human involved in the process, right? So, you know, this is also about balancing work life and employee and customer experiences. So when you talk about limitless investment, in our perception, it's really about driving efficiency, right? And that can be through message efficiency. It can be through timing and latency. Of course, that's extremely important in our execution systems. It's efficiency in redundancies, right? Like we just had a squall kind of come through Manhattan just as the beginning of this webinar started, and it looked pretty ominous outside, and the lights flickered. So you think about things like hot-to-hot backups and disaster recovery. So you have to spend a tremendous amount on IT budgets to stay ahead of these types of problems, to drive efficiencies, to drive a culture that'll allow people to be able to do more with less. And I think that's really what our key focus is on.
Okay. And Dan, with looking ahead, how do you see the sort of optimal solution?
Yeah, I think you know, I think both Vitaly and Peter kind of foreshadowed my own thoughts. I think, you know, Vitaly was talking about the fact that old code never dies, right? There are always going to be, unless you're a brand new firm that can start from scratch, there's always going to be legacy or heritage applications there. And that's just inevitable. And if we check in with Clear Street in 10 years, they'll be looking at what was built, you know, in the past 5 years as what they think of as their legacy application. So we're always accruing that technical debt. And yet the business can't stand still while we go in and replace those things. And so I think Vitaly kind of commented on this idea of being able to replace incrementally. I refer to it as rebuilding your house brick by brick while you're still living inside of it. So instead of buying a plot of land, taking out a mortgage, building a brand new house, and waiting till everything is perfect to move in, being able to kind of update your house more like Lego bricks. And so I think that optimal state, Sarah, that you're asking about, you know, what would it look like with limitless investment, is this idea of kind of a nimble, agile IT infrastructure where you can really pull things in and pull things out and plug things in like Lego bricks. And as the business changes, as mergers happen, to Peter's point, or as new applications are built by your in-house team, or new vendor applications come up, those can be plugged in. And so you have this kind of flexibility, but for the user, the workflows are still seamless. The workflows are still optimized. Even if you swap in one TCA tool for another TCA tool, it doesn't break the continuity of that workflow. And what we hear consistently from customers, I think very much echoes Peter's point, which is the whole point of this is to make the traders more effective and more efficient. And the stats from Harvard Business Review and some other sources as well say about 9% of people's time is spent on the toggle tax, switching between applications. So if you look at that, that's, call it 45 minutes a day. And you say, I talk to roundtables all the time. What would you want your traders to do if they had an extra 30, 45 minutes in their day? And sometimes the answers vary. It could be get home to their wife and kids, at a reasonable hour. More often than not, I would want the traders to be able to be more involved in the investment management life cycle. I want them spending more time with the portfolio managers, more time with the research desk, bringing their insight and knowledge of what's happening out in the market from market structure, liquidity, dynamics, bring that information and insight back into the investment management process, effectively, upskilling or allowing their skills to really shine, bring alpha into that process. And so I think the optimal future state is a flexible plug and play architecture using interoperability that enables those seamless, efficient workflows and lets people do their best work, right? Freeing people up to do the higher value tasks and not just being the human interoperability layer between a bunch of siloed applications.
Okay, that's great. Thank you all very much indeed. And we'll be helping everybody to get there during the rest of the webinar. But on that basis, let's see where the problems and the pain points are for our audience. So another poll question for you here. It asks, what are the challenges of implementing desktop interoperability at your organization? There's a bit of a list there, so please tick as many of the boxes as are appropriate to your organization. And while you do that, I am actually going to come back to Dan, I think, to ask him how he sees the challenges. The perfect picture, what as it might be today, is great, but what are the challenges of getting there?
Well, as we've all learned today, the biggest stumbling block is pronouncing interoperability. There's a reason we named the firm Interop.io and not interoperability.io. No one would be able to spell or pronounce it. I think the most difficult stumbling block is not the availability of the technology. It's not the availability of the smart developers and systems integrators to do the work. It's not the vendor community not supporting it. The hardest thing is the internal justification and change management for why interoperability should be a priority. I think we talk to customers and often they'll say, well, we want to do interoperability, but we're implementing a new OMS and that's going to take the next 2 years and suck up all the oxygen in the room, or we're doing X, Y, and Z. And I think, it's from my perspective, interoperability is part of the solution to implementing those things more quickly. And again, being able to implement things without disrupting the workflow. And so it's always ironic to me that people say, well, I have to wait until everything gets to this perfect place of stability before I can implement interoperability, when in fact, interoperability is designed to recognize what Vitaly pointed out, which is you're always going to be replacing things. You're always going to be adding things. Change is constant. And so, building out that business case internally for, the efficiency and effectiveness that Peter wants to see, and the kind of IT agility that Vitaly was talking about, I think is a really critical piece of it. And so something we spend a lot of time with our customers is building out that business case. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we see.
Okay, Vitaly, what would you say there?
Yeah, I would agree with Dan that sometimes it's just the psychology of the organization. For instance, the organization prefers to work with a single vendor or build in-house, and then they say, why would we invest into some interoperability or compatibility of the software solutions if it's just ours, right? We can go and change that on the source code level. So yeah, it's weird that we're in a financial world where everyone is taught to diversify, but when you go into the fintech and like instead of diversifying, you just select the best single vendor and the best single platform that will get outdated in maximum 10 years. Right, so I think, yeah, that's the biggest challenge, just to change CTOs' minds, business decision minds, and like bring them back to reality. And from the technical standpoint, I think we are in a much better world than we were, say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Finally, all the browsers are compatible with each other. So when you create a web application, it will work on mobile, on desktop, on tablet, it will work on Mac OS and Windows and Linux, right? So if you just develop a web application nowadays, it's already much smaller effort to make it compatible depending on the device. Then it's easier to embed, right? So it's easier to take the part of the web application, call it a widget, and insert it into another application, whether it's another website or desktop application, and just let them communicate. Of course, there will be a security concern, right? So these applications should not, how to say, let the user data being lost or corrupted or stolen. But otherwise, yeah, there are, from the technology standpoint, there are much more ways today to create such applications.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's see the poll results, if we may. And Vitaly, tell me what you think to that. Obviously, you both mentioned, you know, getting people on board to do this, and that is right down there. I think it's 36%. Vitaly, legacy infrastructure, is that something you meet when you're out there with your clients?
All right. Yeah, legacy infrastructure. Yeah, I would agree, but I think reluctance to change and lack of budget and resources are bigger issues.
Okay, thank you. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And moving on, Peter, can I come to you as a practitioner? You might want to add some challenges there. And once you've added them, how do you approach them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of the challenges at the execution level are, right, all of what we do, you're licensed in the financial industry, right, to be able to access markets and be responsible for the technology that's interacting with exchanges and other, you know, key infrastructure destinations. So the challenges are to really get a mature piece of software or infrastructure that is ready to actually be certified and then connected to these end states, which can take time, right? It takes a ton of different UAT, a ton of testing, a ton of investment, and then really, you know, fortifying that infrastructure so that you have, you know, 99.999% uptime. And that is resilient as well too from other types of weaknesses or vulnerabilities, and that could be either, you know, sort of cyber attacks, or it could be different loads that would be placed on this particular module, right, as Dan mentioned earlier, that would slow down its process and then inhibit, you know, a client from accessing the markets in a fiduciary way that we're responsible for. So that infrastructure maturity is a bit of a challenge, right? Because sometimes you need to actually be in a production environment to be able to see how well something works. And generally speaking, in my world, I don't have that luxury. And as most know, going from UAT to production has vast, you know, kind of differences most of the time. But we have, you just try to continue to put simulations and then use, you know, real accurate data and reconciliation of those two messages across that blood-brain barrier to be able to remediate any type of exposure to variabilities when you do go and deploy into production.
Okay, thank you. And Vitaly, what do you see in terms of, you know, trying to help people resolve the problems that we've identified?
Right. Yeah, I would add to what Peter just said, that when we talk about compatibility of the software on the server side, it's much more challenging than on the front end side. So when we go back to the topic desktop interoperability, it's not a big deal in terms of like the data is already on client's computer, right? So we already have compatibility in the data layer. We just need to agree on the protocol, right? And then yeah, some pieces of the software will not be able to integrate, so probably just replaced. But gradually we can get to the point when yeah, we finally have an open architecture where with a standard data layer we can create new pieces, keep existing pieces. Yeah, this is probably the only way, like gradual upgrade of the software and getting to the point when you never should create from scratch.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much indeed. And digging a little bit deeper and staying with you, Vitaly, what kind of technologies and tools and services and solutions can help firms to lay the foundations for what will be best of breed trading solutions based on interoperability? Are there particular technologies that are helpful these days?
Yeah, I already mentioned. So if you develop application using web-based stack, TypeScript and say React or any other cross-platform technology, modern technology, you already fixed a lot of potential issues, right? Also, you allow your clients to go mobile, so you can create software that will work smooth both on smartphone and on desktop, using the same code base, the same technology. Then again, already mentioned some standardization of the protocols, right? So fix was already mentioned. Yeah, there are a lot of different fixes, but more or less it's the same technology. But it's server to server. It's classic B2B way of communication. Again, if we turn back to the desktop needs to talk to the server, and it has to be something on top of HTTPS. Right, so maybe we are not so far from getting to some standard in this world. But again, to my experience, I learned probably 10 different REST APIs, B2C APIs that we had to integrate with in our experience in DevExperts. So far there is no common standard, but why not? Maybe Dan will give us more details about this, the standard in industry here.
Okay, let's jump forward to that, Dan. Tell us a little bit about how you see resolving some of these challenges and how standards could perhaps help. And then Peter, I might bring you in to comment on standards as well, if I may. So Dan.
Yeah, I think when we talk about interoperability, the core standard is FDC3, which is an open standard that lives inside FinOS, which is the FinTech Open Source Foundation, which itself is part of the Linux Foundation, so very large and reputable open source foundation. And the fascinating thing about FDC3 and been involved in it since the very beginning is that right it has brought to the table buy sides, sell sides, and vendors, fierce head-to-head competitors, ourselves and our own competitors, from a technology perspective, to agree on these standards. And like all standards, there's a balancing act of doing enough that solves real-world problems while not being so prescriptive that it is inflexible. And then I think the kind of chicken and egg problem of a standard is only good if everybody uses it, but if everybody isn't using it, then you won't start using it. And so I think we've kind of gotten past those two tipping points where the standard does enough to solve real world problems on the desk without being so prescriptive that it's brittle, which is a real credit to the people developing the standard. And then second, we've passed that tipping point on adoption. The major technology vendors out there in the world, whether it's Charles River or LSEG or FlexTrade or whoever, like just random ones that come to mind, have all either adopted it or said they're going to adopt it. So you've got kind of the core OMS, EMS, and market data providers, and then the broader fintech ecosystem adopting it. And then when we talk to firms, they're building, as Vitaly talked about, in web technology for their new applications, and they're adding FDC3 support from the very beginning. I got to see a couple weeks ago from Genesis, the low-code vendor that a lot of folks are using to build some of their in-house applications. You can literally click a checkbox to add FDC3 support to your application when you build it. It's just become drop dead simple to do it. I think, when I think about the impediments that people voted for, I thought it was really interesting because two of the top four were legacy infrastructure and siloed applications, which is ironic to me because those are problems that interoperability is designed to solve. And so when we think about siloed applications, being able to add this lightweight standard to these applications and then have them be able to interoperate and communicate breaks down those silos. And a lot of legacy applications, they're not built in modern web technology. It's not sadly as fast and easy to add them. But vendors like us have .NET, Java, C++, et cetera, libraries that can be added in. We can use the APIs that exist inside those applications to retrofit interoperability support. So, I think we need to kind of think about turning those impediments on their head and saying interoperability is actually a solution to this, where you can have your legacy applications sitting side by side with modern web applications, can break down those silos. So I guess that would be my 2 cents on it.
Okay, thank you. Peter, what do the standards mean to you as a practitioner? Is this something that you're working on, keen to work with? Or are you not there yet? What's happening for you?
No, I have to be able to accept it all, right? As a broker dealer, I don't have, unfortunately, the luxury of just saying, hey, this is my standard of standards, and then have a sort of, an end-to-end state that really, folks have to adhere to and sort of code to me. Which makes it pretty challenging because it really looks into the evolution of maturity for our clients and then the vendors that they're using to access us. So we do a lot of information transmission via Fix. Fix is doing some upgrades as well too in their own protocol language. So you have to be able to handle both of those, which then generally means that you need a normalization layer to basically do some transformation. Transformation nowadays is much simpler than it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but then ultimately you do sacrifice some things like latency. And latency is extraordinarily important as we kind of go down the continuum of the world getting smaller and investors around the globe wanting to access markets 24/7. At Clear Street, we actually do some trading 24 hours a day. Our networks are up 24/5. So we're doing overnight dateline executions, which then have all types of different ramifications for clearing and settlement and T+1, which is happening as we speak right now. So standards are very important for us to be nimble to fit those the different standards, and APIs are really one of those interesting open source manners that we'll be able to connect with clients through either WebSocket or REST types of protocols to make that a little bit more interoperability happen outside of the fixed networks that we operate to.
Okay, thank you. And staying with you, Peter, we've talked about some of the challenges and we've talked about some of the cultural issues and things like that. How can firms implement these solutions to ensure they are working in an optimal kind of way? And how can they be sure that they're going to get business value? Obviously, POCs are one way, but it's a lot to do and get it wrong.
It is.
So how can they be sure that implementing is going well?
Yeah, that's hard because that starts to talk about the business aspect of it. And I've run electronic businesses for 20 years now, and you're always trying to pass the puck to the skater ahead of where they are, right? So you're trying to forecast effectively where the client is going to be at a particular period of time, because these systems do obviously take time to research and then obviously author go through UAT and then bring into deployment. And of course, even when you do forecast that, you've got all kinds of other things that challenge that predictability, which are obviously regulatory. You even have economic and macro forces. Things like Brexit, for instance, will obviously destabilize your targets when you're thinking about how to actually access and grow across the globe. So you really have to just stay close to your clients. This is always going to be a business decision based on business opportunity, and you need to talk to your clients about what's important to them, what are the pain points, how can you solve them, how can you do it very efficiently and effectively across date lines and globally. across assets, and then provide best transparency with information. I think that's one of the great things that we've seen in this acceleration of computing power and just information share and data, is that our clients now have a much better ability to assess their own risk and then be able to make moves on investing and either increasing or lowering that risk based on their own strategies independent of the systems. So being able to be transparent and clean through that whole life cycle will help you ensure that your investment in interoperability is the right one to land in the future with what their needs are.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's take a break for some questions. I have quite a few here from our audience. And Dan, I'm coming to you with the first one. We touched on this earlier. It says, we have some legacy apps. Is it possible to bring them into an interoperability framework?
The short answer is absolutely. There's not a single one of our client implementations that doesn't include legacy applications. So those could be, again, .NET, Java, C++, delivered over Citrix to the desktop from a remote data center. You name it, we've encountered it. Delphi-based applications, like languages that I haven't thought about in 20 years. Those are a critical piece of this. And so yes, absolutely, the technology exists, and it's not that difficult or expensive. It is a little bit more difficult, a little bit more expensive than just a web app, but everybody has legacy applications. They're a core part of Interop.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Coming to you, Peter, again, quite difficult on this one. How can the costs of interoperability be contained when users have some of the same and some different applications on their desktops? I guess it's a licensing question. You know, some have got some got others. Where do you work out where your costs are and contain those?
Yeah, I think, first of all, just tracking costs are really important. In my business, we have variable costs in some of our execution channels. So for instance, you know, we've obviously, if you go and buy or sell a stock on the exchange, there will be an exchange cost to that. There's regulatory costs for that. Some clients get charged on a cost plus basis. Some get charged on an all-in basis. This is not unique to equities. Of course, it goes across even, you know, digital assets and of course options and others, depending on a whole host of different, you know, asset characteristics. So I think, first of all, following the opportunity and the cost and being able to assign it towards, you know, some type of attribution is really important. Of course, the systems that we're defining and developing already inherently allow us to do that. Right. I'm sure, you know, Vitaly and Dan have implemented solutions that allow that tracking to be much more robust and verbose, and not only that, but also be real time. So those are very helpful trends that are allowing us to really recognize what your actual costs are. You don't have to wait for a bill at the end of the month. You don't need aggregations or to separate things out generally. And then you can really realize and rationalize the investment versus the trade-off in what the cost is going to be. But again, you know, it is a challenge because there isn't anything that's very predictable with regards to, you know, sometimes usage and you know, forecasting in volatile environments. So you just have to continue to monitor those things and adjust as your client adjusts to using your systems.
Okay, thank you.
May I add to this?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that's it may be different on the first day and say in a few years from the beginning. So on the first day, you select the cheapest possible solution with a single vendor, and then the running cost of the solution starts growing and growing and growing, right? So and when you cannot replace part of it and improve, you need to completely replace the whole solution. Then it becomes terrible, right? So I think that if the competition between vendors comes to a client desktop, right, not to the organization, because now you can work with multiple vendors. If their solutions are compatible, it's better for end users. It's better for businesses that are looking for such solutions. So the competition brings more values to customers.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. And staying with you, Vitaly, there's one here, and it says that other than money, I guess here we're talking about what are the inherent risks of interoperability?
Shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so first of all, Peter mentioned latency. So we shouldn't compromise, no one should compromise on latency and availability time, right? So if my system consists of multiple modules, these modules still need to provide the performance of a single system, right? So the way how they communicate should not be worse as if they were a single solution. I'm sure from a technical standpoint it's doable. Again, it's about protocols and following the standards and using tools properly for what they were designed, right? And second risk that we need to keep in mind is that, and that also applies to the microservice architecture that is worth to mention. Any of the microservices that are part of your platform should not be on a critical path, right? Because the microservice architecture assumes that one of the microservices might go down, right, for maintenance and then come back. So your workflow should not depend on that single microservice. It should not stop, right? I think that if the system is designed this way, we're good.
Okay, Peter, you're nodding. Do you see the risks there?
Yeah, I do. I just think that's great. There's you have more systems talking to each other, right? To keeping them up on state, on risk, on profitability, on all of these different metrics, which generally means that you've got to multicast information to many different modules. And that multicasting can ultimately denigrate performance, right, in some of these modules that aren't core to really the main, let's say, the main execution line that you're trying to actually achieve low latency on. And sometimes, when you're not architecting these systems from end to end, and you're ultimately providing interoperability, whether that's a vendor-to-vendor solution or it's a vendor to in-house solution, or even just in-house to in-house, and they're just two architects that are working on it. Sometimes there just isn't that continuity of understanding to really optimize those points. I mean, Vitaly, you said it as well too, that if you're using it in one container, but you end up changing that into multiple containers, it should still be, the end solution should still be more robust and lower latency and be able to scale. So we see it all the time now, and it's really incredible amount how the world, maybe 10 years ago has changed with regards to, the amount of messaging traffic on exchanges, the amount of low latency getting down into the hardware FPGA solutions with nanosecond requirements, doing very robust and important 15C35 market access checks, taking all of this information and storing it and being able to upload it into regulatory systems like the CAT systems and lifecycle surveillance and 605 and 606 reports. So there's a lot of data that gets generated that needs to be also needs to feed other critical systems, but optimizing that is really important so that you don't compromise another part downstream. See it every day.
Okay, thank you. In a similar vein, Ben, this one asks, what are the data privacy issues here and how can you resolve those? You're on mute. Can you just,
it was bound to happen at one point during this webinar that one of us would try to speak while muting. I'm just glad it could be me. So I think, the data privacy and security concerns are worth talking about, right? So in general, when we talk about desktop interoperability, all of those messages between these different applications as they're being orchestrated to deliver a workflow, those messages are staying on that computer, right? They're all happening locally through a message bus or an event router. And so, it's still at the endpoint. Nothing is going into the cloud. Our perspective as a vendor is we don't want to know what your users are doing. So while we offer the ability for you to collect insights, using telemetry, be able to gather information about what applications your users are doing, our solution at least doesn't phone home. So we have no insight or visibility into what your traders, your PMs, et cetera, are doing on the desk, on their desktop. In fact, all of those messages stay local to their computer. But there are, security concerns when you even between applications and saying, hey, the hard part, the first hard part is how do I get all my applications to talk together? And then the second part you get to is once they can all talk to each other, how do I control that? So vendor A doesn't want their application to be able to talk to vendor B. How do you prevent message spoofing, tapping of messages, listening in on messages to an application that might be a web-based application that gets downloaded from the internet that you don't know and you don't trust? Those kinds of things are not covered by the FDC3 standard, right? Those are implementation level details. And something where vendors like us have invested in building technology. We even have a patent on one of our approaches to solving one of the problems that I just talked about. So it is something to think about, and I think worth involving your security and compliance folks early in the process to understand what this stuff is, not to wait until you're in procurement and they send out a questionnaire or a survey and you're trying to explain it retroactively. So I think there are some security and privacy concerns that are worth talking about, and not all vendors approach it the same way that we do. And so I think it's a good thing to include in your conversations, whether you're going to build your own solution or you're going to license something from somebody like us to make sure that you address.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Peter, back to you with another one. And the answer is me, as in you, I think. But it says, here we go. Who should be in charge of monitoring the performance of interoperable desktops, and what should they be measuring? Now, the answer could be you, but who should it be?
So this has been an interesting road for me to travel on for the last 25 years. You can kind of go to the early days when there was a separation between NASDAQ names and the New York Stock Exchange names, and those were two different destinations and two different protocols, and really obviously two different ways of buying and selling stock. And all of that sort of just evolved to become more efficient. And, I just remember I worked on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and to get an edge, I actually picked up the Wall Street Journal, and they looked into overnight happenings in markets in Asia, and came in and gave some of my brokers a heads up on what was going on with regards to macro events, and they thought that was amazing and just really an alpha edge for them. Well, obviously that was a long time ago, and now we're into this world where you're just asked to do more, right? So you have to own it. You have to be a player coach. You have to understand microsecond and millisecond in confidence levels, and you really have to monitor it yourself. And you need tools to help you monitor it. You don't have to be able to, you shouldn't be writing scripts, but it should be provided to you in dashboards and alerting systems. And what's happened over the years is we used to get alerts that would show a problem of an order, and now really you sort of do the opposite. You sort of accept everything to be working, and then you just get a hospital or an exception principle that will promote to your front end systems that will then allow a human to be able to go in and either affect just a single order or do macro events to help stabilize the plant or reduce some type of this this issue that needs to be remediated. So I think you really have to own it yourself. Of course, then you need a deeper dive with your engineers and your network and connectivity teams to really specialize in doing things like heartbeats and resequencing. But yeah, you really have to be a player coach these days and understand your infrastructure.
What are you measuring, Peter?
Well, so generally speaking, that will be message traffic latency. We'll look at loads on CPUs, right? So if we get a certain number of orders in per second, we want to make sure that the garbage collections are being handled properly. Some of those are small garbage collections that don't really happen, that will interfere with production, but some of those are larger garbage collections where you have to start to allocate hardware like cache and resources like that to digest quicker. So there's some of the I guess more of the network and infrastructure. But then you're also looking for issues that perhaps are coming from the human, right? So order inputs that were incorrect, permutations that Fix doesn't like, or that aren't just accepted at the exchange level. And of course, as a regulated broker-dealer, we're going down as ClearStreet to those exchanges and are responsible for making sure that we don't do anything that isn't accepted. So we have all of those types of alerts on our side. So it's an interaction with clients as well too, to help inform them and instruct them how to use algos and DMA and different order types and all the rules and regulations. But we're watching for a whole host of things over here to make sure that we minimize that exposure.
Okay, thank you, Ben. You were going to add that.
Yeah, so I just
Sorry,
wanted
Dan.
to comment on that. It's okay. On the question of kind of monitoring and who's responsible for this. What's really interesting is when we go in and we talk with people about their current state, in general, almost universally, but I'll say in general, people don't know which applications their users use, in what order they use them, who uses which ones. Are my top performers, bottom performers using different applications? Are people actually using the pre-trade TCA when they're supposed to, or are they ignoring it? And so one of the benefits of having an orchestration layer like interoperability is that you can actually gather that data and analyze it and basically be able to see what those user journeys actually look like. We have implemented solutions for very large clients with a lot of in-house applications, only for them to come back and question, why is no data coming in from this application? Something must be wrong. And it turns out they built an application and nobody was using it. So people literally have no idea what their users are doing, which applications or systems they're touching. When we work in other spaces like wealth management, where you've got larger number of people, so Peter has 8 people on the desk. Each one probably has slightly different workflows, but I've got 6,000 wealth advisors. I want to know, what do my top 10% do? What do my bottom 10% do? How do I start to think about the behaviors that drive performance? So there are actually a lot of really interesting business intelligence that you can gather once you're actually able to get a view of what the user is doing across multiple application workflows.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. And one last quick one, because I have to ask this one, and I have to ask it to Vitaly, I think. It says, I lost it, they're all here somewhere. Basically, it says, what will the implications of AI and Gen AI be here on interoperability?
All right. So, yeah, again, I just must repeat that any technology must be used properly, right? So AI can bring a lot of value, but AI can also kill, if not human, but business. So I think that's one of the concerns of the usage of the AI is that the data should not leave the house, right? So you must have your own model. You should not depend on any like external third party and moreover open source solution where you don't control where your data goes, right? And then there is a science how to test AI, right? Because comparing to classic software, you cannot test every workflow because there is a limited amount of answers that AI may generate for you. So you test it against another AI, basically, right? So it's just a different, different business area that just starts growing, and we'll definitely see a lot of value coming from its usage. But I suggest just be careful, not take any first solution that you see, because maybe you don't need it, or maybe it's too dangerous to use it out of the box.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that's something we'll come back to, certainly in our events coming up. Excellent, thank you. Let's run a last poll question. I know we're running out of time, so let's just run it and then make a very quick comment on it. So this one asks, what extent of business and operational gains do you gain, or would you expect to gain from getting all this right with desktop interoperability? So let's give our audience a little bit of time. And Peter, you tell us, what sort of gains do you think you gain, well, I think we should know, in terms of business and operations?
Yeah,
the
I
right way
think
to go?
again, it sort of goes back just to efficiency, you know, and the team, right? The team can expand their understanding more because the interoperability, bringing information directly to us in our screens real time, helps us become more efficient, more confident in our decisions. It helps us expand our ability to go and do, you know, really more interaction with clients and help them on really their core purpose to actually integrate with our systems is to invest, right? To purchase and sell and manage risk. And we can develop that relationship and help them understand the tools that they're using better. So, you know, I think that understanding state and making us more efficient as operators and more cohesive as teams, again, across different date lines and different locations and geographically, a really important contribution to interoperability here at ClearStreet.
Okay, thank you. Did you see the web results already? Let's have a look. Ta-da. So still very much on the operational side. I guess there are business benefits, but maybe they will come later. Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And I think we need to come to our final question for today. And that is me asking all our speakers to offer some advice to practitioners who are working in this space. And Vitaly, would you start out here, please?
Okay, so I would say first you need to have a technical review of the solution you're going to use or the solution you're already using, right? If it's FDC3 compatible, right? If at all your current vendor is ready to integrate with third-party software, and just play some scenario where you will be with your software in 5 years or even in 3 years, right? So these are the main questions you need to ask yourself. Then you just run the you can run the like a contest among a few software solutions, select the best one, then again check if they are compatible, and proceed. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Few words from you there, Dan.
Yeah, so I think my single biggest piece of advice is, you know, don't boil the ocean. This is an area where you can get, you know, quick return on investment and real gains, real benefits to your users. Sometimes it's just, how do I, you know, when I click on an order in my OMS, I want Bloomberg to update. That's enough of a win for week one. And then whatever the next week. And so our most successful customers have been doing this kind of iterative problem solving of tackling a specific workflow for a specific user persona, chalking up the victory lap and moving on to the next, as opposed to saying, we're going to get 100% of our systems all interoperable on one day, on day one, fix all the workflows. The nice thing about this kind of nimble architecture is you don't need to start with all your systems. You don't need to start with all your users. You don't need to start with all their workflows. And so setting out that roadmap towards maturity, I think is the most important thing.
Okay. And Peter, some final words from you.
Yeah, I'll make it quick, and I agree with both Vitaly and Dan, and you guys are focusing on the approach, and I'll just sort of take it a little bit more ethereal and say that, you know, anyone that's building these interoperable systems, just think about that future-proof state and making that your solution is actually going to be differentiated in providing value in the future when you do end up, you know, finishing the project through that iterative situation that Dan had mentioned. So focus on speed and scale and expandability and that modularity of it. And if you build on an interoperable language and anchor your foundations from that, you should be all set. So good luck.
Okay, make it sound easy. Peter, and thank you to all our speakers for sharing their expertise and their experience with us today. And thank you to, of course, to our sponsors, DevExperts and Interop.io. Before we close, a quick reminder of the events I told you about earlier on in the webinar. On the 6th of June, we'll be hosting our trading tech briefing in New York. You can see that one on the screen right now. Focus on buy and build the future of capital markets technology. We'll be bringing that home, for me anyway, to London in September. And then again, next month in June, you can join 18 Group's first AI in Capital Markets Summit. Really looking forward to all of those events. So I hope some of you will join us and we'll see you there. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Peter, Dan, and Vitaly, and thank you to all of you for joining the webinar. Finally, please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to improve our products and services. And meantime, that's it, and goodbye.